Kiss me or I'll fire your whole department. A desperate CEO shatters her world with that reckless demand. But when a single dad's reply cuts deeper than her power ever could, it sparks a dangerous game of pride, love, and second chances. Will his dignity break her walls, or will her next move cost them everything? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Thunder rumbled overhead as Emily Carver's heels clicked sharply against the polished floor of Carver Tech's IT department. Rain pelted against the windows, matching her stormy expression. The morning had started badly and was quickly spiraling into her worst nightmare. The normally bustling department fell silent as she burst through the glass doors. Heads ducked behind computer monitors, fingers froze over keyboards, and whispered conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone knew that look on the CEO's face? It meant trouble. Emily's designer blazer was perfectly pressed, her dark hair smoothly styled, but her usual composure had cracked. Her hands shook as she clutched a tablet, knuckles white against the sleek device. The security breach notification had hit her inbox just 30 minutes ago, threatening millions in contracts and the company's reputation. "Where's Daniel Brooks?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to make a nearby intern flinch. "Right here, Miss Carver." Daniel's calm voice came from behind her as he emerged from his office. He stood tall and steady, his blue eyes meeting hers without fear. His rolled-up sleeves and slightly loosened tie suggested he'd already been hard at work, probably since before dawn. "My office, now." Emily spun on her heel, expecting him to follow. Daniel fell into step beside her, his presence irritatingly composed compared to her barely contained panic. The IT team watched them disappear into his modest corner office, their worried faces reflecting in the glass walls. Emily thrust the tablet at him. "Explain this." Daniel took the device, his expression growing serious as he scanned the security alert. "We detected the breach at 4 a.m. My team's been working on it since." "Working on it?" Emily cut him off, her voice rising. "This isn't some minor glitch, Brooks. We have contracts worth millions hanging in the balance. The board meeting is in 2 hours and I need this fixed." A flash of lightning illuminated the office, followed by a crash of thunder that made the windows rattle. Daniel set the tablet down carefully on his desk. "We're doing everything we can," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I've got our best people." "Your best isn't good enough." Emily paced the small space, her anxiety mounting. "Do you have any idea what this could do to the company? To all the families depending on these jobs?" Daniel's expression softened with understanding. "I know exactly what's at stake, Miss Carver. Every person in this department has family depending on them, including me." Emily stopped pacing, turning to face him. The mention of family hit a nerve she hadn't expected. She knew about Daniel's situation. The whole company did. A widower raising his daughter alone, never missing a school event despite his responsibilities at work. His dedication to both his child and his team had earned him respect throughout Carver Tech. But right now, his calm was infuriating her. She needed action, solutions, not this peaceful acceptance. "Then fix it," she demanded, stepping closer. "Whatever it takes. We're implementing additional security protocols," Daniel explained, pulling up diagrams on his computer. "See here? We've already isolated the affected systems, and I don't need technical details." Emily slammed her hand on his desk, making his coffee mug jump. "I need results." The IT team outside tried to pretend they weren't watching, but Emily could feel their eyes. Her control was slipping, and she knew it. Years of carefully maintained authority were crumbling in the face of this crisis. Daniel stood up slowly, his height making the small office feel even smaller. "Miss Carver, I understand you're worried, but..." "Worried?" Emily laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "I'm way past worried, Brooks. This company is everything I have, everything my father built. I can't let it fall apart." Something in her voice must have betrayed more than she intended because Daniel's expression changed. For a moment, she saw not just understanding but compassion in his eye. It made her feel exposed, vulnerable, feeling she'd spent years bearing under sharp suits and sharper words. The storm outside grew louder, rain drumming against the windows like an anxious heartbeat. Emily felt trapped between the weather and Daniel's steady gaze, her usual defenses crumbling. "If you can't fix this," she said, her voice dropping dangerously low, "I'll have to let people go, starting with your department." Daniel didn't flinch. "Threats won't make the work go faster, Miss Carver." "Then what will?" Emily stepped closer, desperation making her reckless. Her next words came out before she could stop them, shocking even herself. "Kiss me, or I'll fire your whole department." The office went absolutely still. Through the glass walls, she saw several heads snap up, mouths dropping open. The absurdity of what she'd just said hung in the air between them, heavy as the storm clouds outside. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes seeing right through her desperate bluff. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "My daughter lost her mother to pride and cruelty," he said, each word measured and clear. "I won't let her lose me to yours. Fire us if you must." Emily felt like she'd been struck. All her power, her authority, her carefully constructed walls, none of it could stand against the simple dignity in his words. For the first time in years, she found herself completely disarmed. She stared at him, seeing not just the department head who refused to bend to her will, but a father who wouldn't compromise his principles, a man who faced the threat of losing everything with more grace than she'd shown in facing the threat of losing anything. Thunder crashed outside, but Emily barely heard it. She stood frozen, her earlier fury replaced by something she couldn't quite name. Shame? Respect? Whatever it was, it left her shaken to her core. Daniel held her gaze, neither challenging nor submitting, simply standing in his truth. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain against the windows and the distant tapping of keyboards as his team continued their work, their loyalty to their leader evident in every keystroke. Emily's hands shook as she pushed through the heavy oak door of her corner office. The morning rain continued its steady drumbeat against the floor-to-ceiling windows, but she barely noticed. Her chest felt tight, and her face burned with embarrassment. She collapsed into her leather chair, letting out a shaky breath. "What was I thinking?" she whispered, pressing her fingertips to her temples. The image of Daniel Brooks standing there, calm and dignified despite her outburst, wouldn't leave her mind. His words echoed in her thoughts. "My daughter lost her mother to pride and cruelty. I won't let her lose me to yours." Emily's gaze fell on the framed photos lining her desk, awards, business achievements, press coverage of her success. But for the first time in years, they felt hollow. She thought of little Sophie Brooks, a bright-eyed 7-year-old she glimpsed occasionally in the building when Daniel brought her to work. The thought of that child losing another parent made her stomach twist. Claire, her assistant, appeared in the doorway. "Miss Carver, the board is asking about the security breach." Emily waved her off. "Tell them I'm handling it." She swiveled in her chair to face the rain-streaked windows, watching streams of water chase each other down the glass. Daniel's team was the best in the industry. She knew that. They'd saved the company more than once with their innovations, and she just threatened to fire them all because she was scared and angry. "Claire," she called out suddenly, "get Daniel Brooks back up here. Now." While she waited, Emily paced her office, her heels sinking into the plush carpet. She stopped at the window, watching the city skyline blur through the rain. The door opened quietly behind her. "You wanted to see me?" Daniel's voice was steady, professional. Emily turned. He stood just inside the doorway, his posture relaxed but alert. No fear, no anger, just quiet strength. It unsettled her all over again. "Close the door," she said, working to keep her voice even. When he did, she gestured to one of the chairs facing her desk. "Please sit." Daniel took the offered seat, his expression carefully neutral. His brown eyes watched her with a patience that made her nervous. Emily returned to her chair, taking a moment to gather her thoughts. "What I did downstairs was unprofessional," she began, "and inappropriate." "Yes, it was," Daniel agreed simply. His candor surprised a small laugh out of her. "You're not going to make this easy, are you?" "I don't believe in making things easy just to be polite, Miss Carver. Not when people's livelihoods are at stake." Emily leaned forward, resting her elbows on her desk. "You're right, and that's exactly why I called you back up here. I have a proposition for you." Daniel raised an eyebrow but remained silent. 30 days, she said. "Give me a comprehensive plan to upgrade our security systems and prevent another breach like this morning's. Show me innovation that will put us ahead of our competitors. If you and your team can do that, not only will everyone keep their jobs, but I'll personally ensure your department gets the funding you've been requesting for the past year." She watched as Daniel processed her words, his fingers drumming once on the armrest of his chair. "That's a tall order for 30 days. Can your team handle it?" "We can," he said without hesitation. "But I need to know this isn't just another power play, Miss Carver. My people work hard, and they deserve better than being used as pawns in a game." Emily felt the sting of his words, but kept her face composed. "No games, no ultimatums, just business, the way it should have been from the start." Daniel studied her for a long moment. She could almost see him weighing his options, considering the implications for his team, for his daughter. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we'll do it. But not for you, Miss Carver. For my team and for their families who depend on these jobs. I understand." Emily stood, extending her hand across the desk. 30 days, Mr. Brooks. He rose and shook her hand firmly. His palm was warm and calloused. "Working hands," she noted absently. Without another word, he turned and left her office, closing the door quietly behind him. Emily sank back into her chair, her hand tingling where they'd touched. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, and weak sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. She touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of those impulsive, angry words she'd spoken downstairs. "What just happened to me?" she whispered to her empty office. The key clinked against the lock as Daniel Brooks opened the front door of his modest two-story home. The familiar scent of the lavender air freshener Sophie had picked out welcomed him. He dropped his worn leather briefcase by the coat rack and hung up his jacket, still damp from the morning's rain. "Daddy!" Sophie's voice rang out from the living room where she sat at the coffee table, surrounded by colored pencils and paper. Her long brown hair was tied in two slightly uneven braids, probably Mrs. Martinez's handiwork from after-school care. "Hey, sweetheart." Daniel's smile came easily now, the tension from the day melting away as his 8-year-old daughter wrapped her arms around his waist. "Have you started your homework?" "Almost done." Sophie held up a math worksheet covered in neat rows of multiplication problems. "Mrs. Alvarez says I'm getting really good at my times tables." "That's my girl." Daniel ruffled her hair gently. "How about we make some spaghetti for dinner? You can tell me all about your day while we cook." Sophie's face lit up. "Can I help stir the sauce?" "Absolutely. But first, wash those colorful hands." He pointed to her fingers, stained with purple and blue marker ink. In the kitchen, Daniel pulled out the familiar ingredients: pasta, ground beef, tomato sauce, and the special blend of Italian seasonings his late wife Maria had always used. Sophie perched on her step stool at the counter, carefully tearing lettuce leaves for a small salad while Daniel browned the meat. "Jenny lost her tooth at recess today," Sophie reported, her voice full of excitement. "And Max brought his new puppy for show and tell. He's so tiny and brown with spots." Daniel listened, adding occasional wows and "really?" as he stirred the sauce. The routine of cooking dinner together felt like a warm blanket around his shoulders, helping him process the day's events. "How was your day, Daddy?" Sophie asked, sliding the torn lettuce into a bowl. "Did you catch any bad guys trying to hack the computers?" Daniel chuckled at her way of describing his cybersecurity work. "Well, actually, something interesting did happen today." He measured out the spaghetti, breaking the strands in half before dropping them into the boiling water. "You remember Miss Carver, the lady who owns the company?" Sophie nodded. "The one who always wears those clicking shoes and never smiles?" "That's her." Daniel stirred the pasta thoughtfully. "She came to see our team today because there was a problem with our computer systems. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She told us we need to fix everything and make some big improvements, or people might lose their jobs." Sophie's eyes widened. "Even you?" "Even me," Daniel admitted, keeping his tone light despite the weight in his chest. "But don't worry, sweetie. We have a whole month to show Miss Carver that our team is worth keeping. We're going to work really hard." Sophie was quiet for a moment, her small fingers playing with the edge of her placemat as Daniel drained the pasta. "Is Miss Carver mean?" she finally asked. Daniel thought about Emily's frustrated face, the flash of vulnerability he'd glimpsed when he'd mentioned his daughter. "I don't think she's mean," he said slowly. "I think maybe she's worried about her company. Sometimes when grown-ups are worried or scared, they don't act like themselves. Like when I got mad at Jenny last week because I was scared about the math test? Exactly like that." Daniel smiled, amazed at his daughter's insight. He spooned the sauce over their plates of spaghetti. Sophie twirled her fork in the pasta, her face thoughtful. "Daddy," she said suddenly, "maybe Miss Carver just needs someone to believe in her. Like how you believed in me when I thought I couldn't learn multiplication." Daniel's hands stilled over his plate. Out of the mouths of babes, he thought, remembering how Emily's usual confident mask had slipped when he'd stood up to her ultimatum. "That's very kind of you to think that way, Sophie," he said softly. "You always try to see the good in people, just like your mom did." They finished dinner with Sophie, sharing more stories about her day. But her words about Emily kept echoing in Daniel's mind. Later, as he tucked Sophie into bed beneath her favorite purple butterfly comforter, she asked sleepily, "Will you help Miss Carver believe in herself, Daddy?" Daniel smoothed her hair back from her forehead, his heart full of love for this gentle soul who'd inherited her mother's compassionate spirit. "I'll do my best to help everyone at work," he said carefully. "But right now, you need to get some sleep. Good night, Daddy. I love you." "Love you too, sweetheart." Daniel stood in Sophie's doorway, watching the star-shaped nightlight cast soft shadows on her peaceful face. In the quiet of the evening, he made a silent promise to himself. He would do everything in his power to save his team's jobs, to protect the families that depended on them, but he would also shield Sophie from the chaos Emily Carver had brought into their lives. His daughter had already lost one parent. He wouldn't let her world be shaken again. He closed Sophie's door softly, leaving it open just a crack the way she liked it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, in this moment, his daughter's innocent wisdom gave him strength. Maybe Sophie was right about Emily needing someone to believe in her, but Daniel's first priority had to be protecting his own little girl's trust in him. The morning sun cast long shadows through the glass-walled corridors of Carver Tech as Daniel made his way to Emily's office. His team had worked late into the night, fueled by determination and countless cups of coffee, to prepare their initial presentation. Under his arm, he carried a well-worn leather portfolio containing their preliminary ideas. Claire, Emily's assistant, looked up from her desk with a gentle smile. "Good morning, Mr. Brooks. Miss Carver's expecting you." Her eyes held a hint of sympathy, having witnessed yesterday's confrontation. Daniel nodded, straightening his tie before entering Emily's office. The space was immaculate, all clean lines and modern furniture, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Emily sat behind her massive desk, typing rapidly on her laptop. "Mr. Brooks," she said without looking up, her voice cool and professional. "I trust you have something worth my time?" "I believe we do." Daniel's calm response made her pause and finally meet his gaze. He pulled out several documents from his portfolio and placed them on her desk. "We've identified 3 major vulnerabilities in our security system and developed solutions for each." Emily's perfectly manicured fingers picked up the first page, her eyes scanning the contents. Her skepticism was evident in the slight arch of her eyebrow. "This island, surprisingly thorough for one night's work. My team is good at what they do, Miss Carver. They always have been." There was quiet pride in his voice. "We just needed someone to notice." Before Emily could respond, Claire's voice came through the intercom. "Miss Carver, the board members are gathering for the 9 o'clock meeting." Emily stood, smoothing her tailored blazer. "You'll present these findings to the board." It wasn't a request. The boardroom was already buzzing with tension when they arrived. 8 executives in expensive suits sat around the polished table, their expressions ranging from bored to hostile. Daniel recognized Marcus Sterling, the company's CFO, who was known for his aggressive cost-cutting measures. "Emily," Marcus began before she could even take her seat, "I've been reviewing our quarterly projections. The numbers don't look good." He slid several charts across the table. "I've prepared a proposal to outsource our IT department to Mumbai. The savings would be substantial." Daniel felt his chest tighten, thinking of his team, of Sarah with her 3 kids in college, of Mike who just bought his first house, of Jenny who was supporting her sick mother, but he kept his expression neutral, waiting. Emily glanced at the proposal, then at Daniel. "Before we discuss outsourcing, Mr. Brooks has some findings to present." Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady as he outlined their security analysis and proposed solutions. He explained how their plan would not only fix the current vulnerabilities, but strengthen the entire system against future threats. "That's all very nice," Marcus interrupted, "but the overseas team can implement the same solutions at half the cost." "No, they can't." Daniel's quiet authority filled the room. "Our team knows this system because we built it. We understand its quirks, its history. More importantly, we know our client's specific needs." He turned to face the board directly. "Last month, when the hospital's emergency system had that glitch at 3 a.m., Jenny from my team was there within 20 minutes. She didn't just fix the code, she knew the staff, understood their workflow, and adapted the solution to make their jobs easier." The board members shifted in their seats, several nodding slightly. "And when the school district's security protocols needed urgent updating," Daniel continued, "Mike worked through the weekend because his own kids are in those schools. This isn't just about code, it's about community." Emily watched him intently, something shifting in her expression. Marcus leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Sentiment doesn't pay the bills, Brooks." "No," Daniel agreed, "but loyalty does. Our client retention rate is 95% because we provide personalized on-site support. Try getting that from halfway around the world." The room fell silent. Emily stood slowly, all eyes turning to her. "Mr. Sterling, while I appreciate your financial analysis, I'm not prepared to dismantle a department that has consistently delivered quality work." Her voice was firm. "Mr. Brooks and his team have 30 days to prove their value. That was our agreement, and I intend to honor it." The meeting adjourned shortly after. Board members filed out, Marcus looking particularly sour. Daniel gathered his materials, acutely aware of Emily's presence still in the room. When he looked up, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between surprise and respect. Neither spoke as Daniel walked to the door. But just before he left, he heard Emily's voice, softer than he'd ever heard it. "Thank you for defending your people, Mr. Brooks." He turned slightly, nodded once, and continued down the hallway. Behind him, Emily remained in the boardroom, her eyes following his retreating figure, something warm and unfamiliar stirring in her chest. The IT department hummed with activity on Thursday afternoon. Screens flickered with lines of code while programmers huddled around workstations, their faces lit by the blue glow of multiple monitors. The familiar scent of coffee and electronics filled the air as Emily's heels clicked against the polished floor. Her presence caused a ripple of tension through the open workspace. She had come to check on their progress, but something caught her eye, a splash of pink and yellow at Daniel's desk. A little girl, no more than 7, sat in his chair, her legs swinging as she bent over what looked like a coloring book. Dark curls fell around her face as she concentrated, her small hand gripping a crayon with determination. Emily's steps slowed. This must be Sophie. She'd seen photos on Daniel's desk, but never the child herself. The girl looked so at home here, surrounded by computers and busy adults, completely absorbed in her artistic endeavors. One of Daniel's team members, Mike, noticed Emily and straightened up. "Miss Carver, Daniel just stepped out to grab some files from the server room. He'll be right back." Emily nodded, but her attention remained on Sophie. The little girl looked up at the mention of names, her warm brown eyes, so like her father's, studying Emily with open curiosity. "Hello," Emily said, surprised by the softness in her own voice. She found herself moving closer, drawn by the child's innocent presence. Sophie's face broke into a bright smile. "Hi, I'm Sophie. Are you Daddy's boss?" "Yes, I am." Emily knelt down beside the chair, bringing herself to Sophie's level. Her expensive suit skirt touched the floor, but she didn't care. "What are you drawing?" Sophie held up her coloring book. "It's a butterfly garden. See? This one's purple because purple is Daddy's favorite color." She pointed to a carefully colored butterfly. "Do you like butterflies?" "I do," Emily replied, finding herself smiling despite her usual professional demeanor. "You're very good at staying in the lines. Mrs. Alvarez says I'm one of the best colorers in first grade," Sophie declared proudly. Then her expression turned thoughtful, studying Emily's face with that disarming directness only children possess. "You're pretty, like the picture Daddy has." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "What picture?" Sophie leaned in close, her voice dropping to what she clearly thought was a whisper but was actually quite audible. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The words hit Emily like a physical force. She froze, her carefully maintained composure cracking. The bustling sounds of the IT department seemed to fade away, leaving only the echo of Sophie's innocent statement. "Sophie!" Daniel's voice cut through Emily's shock. He hurried over from the direction of the server room, folders clutched in his hands. His face showed a mix of embarrassment and concern. "I'm so sorry, Miss Carver. Sophie has quite an imagination sometimes." But Sophie just beamed, completely unaware of the impact of her words. "Daddy, I was showing her my butterflies." Daniel set down his folders and reached for his daughter's hand. "That's nice, sweetheart, but Miss Carver is very busy. Why don't we pack up your coloring books? It's almost time to head home anyway." Emily stood up quickly, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. Her usual sharp comments failed her. She could only watch as Sophie carefully gathered her crayons, humming a cheerful tune. "Miss Carver, about the progress report," Daniel started to say, but Emily cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Tomorrow," she managed to say. "We can discuss it tomorrow." She turned and walked away, her heels no longer clicking with their usual confidence. The IT department's familiar sounds washed over her, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, quiet technical discussions, but she barely heard them. All she could hear was Sophie's sweet voice. "Mommy says you're my daddy." In the elevator, Emily pressed her hand against the cool metal wall, trying to steady herself. She hadn't expected this today, hadn't expected to be confronted with such innocent trust, such unguarded affection. It stirred something deep inside her, something she'd thought long buried under years of corporate ambition and careful control. When she reached her office, she closed the door behind her and stood at her window, looking out over the city skyline without really seeing it. Sophie's words echoed in her mind, bringing with them uncomfortable questions about loneliness, about choices made, about the walls she'd built so carefully around herself. Claire, her assistant, knocked and entered with a stack of reports. Miss Carver, the board is waiting for your response about the quarterly projections. Emily nodded, but her thoughts remained downstairs with the little girl and her butterflies. Her reflection in the window showed her usual polished appearance, perfect makeup, designer suit, not a hair out of place. But somehow, she looked different to herself now. Somehow, a child's innocent mistake had cracked something in her carefully constructed facade. She turned away from the window, forcing herself to focus on Claire and the waiting reports. But Sophie's voice lingered in her mind, a gentle whisper that wouldn't be silenced. Mommy says you're my daddy. 4 simple words that somehow carried the weight of everything she'd been running from, everything she'd convinced herself she didn't need. Claire placed the reports on her desk, glancing at her with concern. Are you all right, Miss Carver? Emily managed a nod, but her usual sharp, of course, died in her throat. She wasn't all right. She wasn't all right at all. A 7-year-old girl with dark curls and a coloring book had just shaken her world with nothing more than a whispered misconception, and Emily had no idea how to handle it. She sat down at her desk, the leather of her chair creaking softly. The reports waited for her attention, but all she could see was Sophie's bright smile. All she could hear was that innocent whisper that had somehow found its way past all her defenses and straight to her heart. Emily sat alone in her dimly lit penthouse apartment, the city lights twinkling below through floor-to-ceiling windows. The clock on her marble wall showed 11:47 p.m., but sleep felt impossible. Sophie's innocent words from that afternoon kept echoing in her mind. Mommy says you're my daddy. She kicked off her heels and curled up on her pristine white couch, something she never did. Her perfectly arranged throw pillows tumbled to the floor, but for once, she didn't rush to fix them. Instead, she reached for an old photo album she hadn't opened in years. The first page showed a little girl with dark curls, herself at Sophie's age. Emily traced the image with her finger, remembering how it felt to be small and vulnerable. In the photo, she stood alone at a school play, wearing a handmade costume her mother's housekeeper had quickly assembled. Neither parent had attended the performance. They were always too busy, Emily whispered to the empty room. Her father had run Carver Tech back then, just as she did now. Board meetings, international calls, and endless business dinners had filled his calendar. Her mother had buried herself in charity, galas, and social committees, leaving Emily in the care of a rotating staff of nannies. Tears surprised her by sliding down her cheeks. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried. When did I become them? She asked herself, thinking of how she'd stormed into the IT department, throwing around threats like her father used to do. In her mind's eye, she saw Sophie again, not just her words, but her bright smile, her easy trust, the way she colored so contentedly at her father's desk. The child had something Emily had never known, complete security and a parent's love. Across town, in a modest 2-bedroom house, Daniel sat in his worn leather armchair, a Bible open on his lap. Sophie had been asleep for hours, but he couldn't shake the day's events from his mind. The soft glow of his reading lamp cast warm shadows on the walls, covered with Sophie's artwork and family photos. Lord, he whispered, careful not to wake his daughter. I don't know what to make of this situation. He thought of Emily's face when Sophie had spoken to her, the crack in her carefully maintained facade, the flash of longing in her eyes before she'd pulled her professional mask back on. Daniel had always seen Emily as the enemy, the cold corporate CEO threatening his team's livelihoods. But today, he'd glimpsed something else. He remembered how she'd knelt down to Sophie's level, how her voice had softened when speaking to his daughter. It was such a contrast to her usual sharp tone that it had stopped him in his tracks. Rising quietly, he walked to Sophie's room and stood in the doorway. His daughter slept peacefully, her stuffed giraffe tucked under one arm. The moonlight filtered through her butterfly curtains, creating gentle patterns on her face. He thought about how blessed they were, even after losing Sarah, to have such a strong bond. Maybe Sophie was right, he murmured, remembering his daughter's words about Emily needing someone to believe in her. He'd been so focused on protecting his team, protecting Sophie, that he hadn't considered Emily might need protection too, from her own loneliness. Back in her penthouse, Emily finally stood up, walking to her home office. She opened her laptop, intending to review some contracts, but instead found herself looking at Daniel's team's personnel files. Each face that smiled back at her from the ID photos belonged to someone with a family, with dreams, with people who depended on them. Just like Daniel depended on his job to provide for Sophie, she clicked on Daniel's file, studying his photo more carefully than she had before. His eyes held a kindness she'd initially mistaken for weakness. Now she recognized it as strength, the same strength that had allowed him to stand up to her ultimatum with dignity rather than anger. In his quiet study, Daniel pulled out his prayer journal, something he'd started after Sarah's death to help process his grief. He wrote honestly about his confusion regarding Emily, about his fear of letting anyone close to Sophie who might hurt her, about his struggle to balance protecting his team with showing compassion to someone who clearly needed it. The central challenge wasn't just about saving jobs anymore. He could feel that shift clearly. This was about trust, about risking vulnerability again. It was about whether two people who'd built walls for different reasons could find the courage to lower them. Emily closed her laptop without sending any emails. For the first time in years, she felt the full weight of her loneliness. Her apartment, despite its expensive furnishings, felt empty in a way she couldn't ignore anymore. She thought about Daniel's small office, cluttered with Sophie's drawings and family photos, and how much warmer it felt than her sterile executive suite. The night stretched on, with both Emily and Daniel awake in their separate spaces, each wrestling with the same question. Could they trust each other enough to build something new from their broken pieces? The company's future hung in the balance, but suddenly that seemed secondary to the deeper challenge they faced. Daniel looked at a photo of Sarah on his bedside table. "What would you think of all this?" he whispered to her image. The answer came to him in Sophie's voice, with that simple wisdom children sometimes have. "Maybe she needs us." Emily finally crawled into bed, her mind still full of Sophie's words and Daniel's quiet strength. The company's problems didn't feel any smaller, but somehow they felt less overwhelming when she thought about facing them with Daniel's team rather than against them. The night settled around both of them, each aware that tomorrow would bring new challenges. The next 30 days would test not just their professional capabilities, but their capacity to trust, to heal, and perhaps to build something neither of them expected, a bridge across their brokenness towards something that looked surprisingly like family. Friday afternoon brought a gentle lull to the IT department. The usual click-clack of keyboards had softened as the weekend approached. Daniel's team worked steadily, their faces lit by monitor screens, while Sophie sat at her father's desk, surrounded by colored pencils and paper. Emily strode through the glass doors, a stack of reports tucked under her arm. The team tensed slightly at her entrance, but kept working. As she approached Daniel's office, Sophie looked up from her drawing and beamed. "Hi, Miss Emily," Sophie waved, her ponytail bouncing. "Want to see what I drew?" Emily paused, caught off guard by the child's warmth. She glanced at Daniel, who gave a small nod while reviewing code on his screen. "Sure," Emily said, stepping closer. Her heels clicked against the tile floor as she moved to stand beside Sophie's chair. Sophie held up her artwork proudly. "It's our church. See the big doors? And the bell tower?" Her small finger traced the crayon lines. "We go every Sunday. You should come with us." The invitation hung in the air. Emily's throat tightened. She couldn't remember the last time she'd set foot in a church. Growing up, her parents had been too busy building their company empire to bother with religion. "Oh, I don't know," Emily started. "Please?" Sophie's brown eyes, so like her father's, looked up hopefully. "Mrs. Martinez makes the best cookies for after service, and the music is really pretty." Daniel finally looked up from his screen, his expression carefully neutral. "Sophie, Miss Emily might have other plans for Sunday." "Do you?" Sophie asked innocently. Emily opened her mouth to make an excuse, but found she couldn't lie to those earnest eyes. "No, actually, I don't." "Then you'll come?" Sophie bounced in her seat. "It starts at 10 o'clock. Daddy always says being early is being on time." Emily felt a smile tugging at her lips, despite herself. Okay. Yes, I'll come." Sophie clapped her hands. "Yay, Daddy! Miss Emily's coming to church!" Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. "We usually meet in the parking lot at 9:45. I can text you the address." "Thank you," Emily said softly, suddenly uncertain about her decision. Sunday morning arrived, crisp and clear. Emily stood in front of her closet, fretting over what to wear. She finally settled on a modest navy dress and low heels, her hands shaking slightly as she fastened her pearl necklace. The church parking lot was already filling when she pulled in at 9:40. She spotted Daniel's familiar sedan and parked nearby. Sophie burst out of their car as soon as she saw Emily, running over in a twirling yellow dress. "You came!" Sophie grabbed Emily's hand. "Come on, I'll show you our spot." The church's stone facade rose before them, morning sunlight warming the weathered walls. Daniel fell into step beside them as Sophie tugged Emily through the heavy wooden doors. Inside, the foyer buzzed with conversation and greeting. Several people smiled and nodded at Emily, their welcome genuine and unforced. "Good morning." A woman with silver hair pressed a bulletin into Emily's hands. "I'm Martha. Are you visiting with the Brooks family?" Before Emily could answer, Sophie piped up. This is Miss Emily. She's Daddy's boss, but she's nice now." Emily felt her cheeks flush, but Martha just laughed warmly. "Well, welcome. We're so glad you're here." Sophie led them to a pew, about halfway down the center aisle. Emily slid in beside her, hyper aware of Daniel's presence on Sophie's other side. The wooden bench felt foreign beneath her, but Sophie's excited chatter helped ease her tension. The service began with music. Emily watched in wonder as the congregation sang together, their voices lifting in harmony. Sophie swayed beside her, singing the familiar words with childish enthusiasm. Even Daniel's deep baritone joined in, though Emily remained silent, not knowing the melodies. The sermon touched on forgiveness, about letting go of past hurts and opening oneself to new possibilities. Emily found herself leaning forward, drawn in by the pastor's gentle words about grace and second chances. She thought of her own hardened heart, of walls built high through years of corporate battles and personal disappointments. Sometimes, the pastor said, the hardest person to forgive is ourselves. But God's love is bigger than our mistakes, stronger than our pride. Emily felt tears prick at her eyes. Sophie reached over and patted her hand, offering a tissue from her little purse. The simple gesture of comfort from a child nearly undid her completely. After the service, they joined the crowd flowing toward the fellowship hall. True to Sophie's promise, Mrs. Martinez's cookies were delicious. Emily found herself surrounded by genuine conversation, free from the usual corporate maneuvering she was accustomed to. People asked about her life with real interest, shared stories about their families, and included her naturally in their circle. "Ready to head out?" Daniel asked eventually, as Sophie finished her second cookie. They stepped out into the autumn sunshine, Sophie skipping ahead on the sidewalk. Golden leaves drifted down from the trees lining the church property. Emily walked slowly, taking in the peace of the moment. "Look, a butterfly!" Sophie called, chasing after an orange monarch. Emily watched her dart across the grass, her yellow dress floating behind her like wings. Daniel kept pace beside Emily, his presence steady and unexpectedly comforting. The morning sermon echoed in her mind as they walked. For the first time in years, Emily felt something shift inside her, a crack in the careful armor she'd built around herself. Here, among these people, with this father and daughter, she'd glimpsed a different kind of life. Sophie ran back to them, breathless and grinning. "Can Miss Emily come again next week?" Emily caught Daniel's eye, seeing the question there. The familiar urge to retreat, to maintain professional distance, rose up, but something stronger made her pause. She looked at Sophie's hopeful face, at the church standing solid behind them, at the community she'd witnessed inside its walls. Could she belong here? The question settled in her heart like a newly planted seed. The office hummed quietly in the evening stillness. Most employees had long since gone home, leaving only the soft glow of security lights and computer screens. Daniel sat at his workstation, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he worked on strengthening the company's security protocols. Emily perched nearby at a borrowed desk, her blazer draped over the chair and her sleeves rolled up. "I think I found another weak spot in the firewall," Daniel said, rubbing his tired eyes. The clock on the wall showed 9:30 p.m. Emily wheeled her chair closer to look at his screen. "Show me." Their shoulders nearly touched as Daniel pointed out the vulnerability. The casual closeness felt strange yet oddly comfortable. Gone was the tension from their first confrontation, replaced by a shared focus on saving the company. "Coffee?" Emily offered, standing up and stretching. "I think we both need it." Daniel nodded gratefully. "That would be great, thanks." When Emily returned with 2 steaming cups, she found Daniel staring at his phone, a soft smile on his face. "Sophie?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, accepting the coffee. "She always sends me a goodnight text with about 20 heart emojis." Emily settled back into her chair. "She's a special kid." "She island," Daniel's voice filled with warmth. "She's so much like her mother. Same gentle heart, same way of seeing the good in everyone." Emily traced the rim of her cup. What happened to your wife, if you don't mind me asking?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Car accident," he finally said. 3 years ago, Sarah was driving home from work in a storm. The other driver was texting and crossed the center line. His voice grew thick. Sophie was only 5. "I'm so sorry," Emily whispered, meaning it. Daniel took a deep breath. "The hardest part was telling Sophie, but somehow she helped me through it. Kids have this amazing capacity for hope, you know?" Emily nodded, though she didn't know. Not really. Her own childhood had been devoid of such innocence. As if reading her thoughts, Daniel asked gently, "What about your family?" Emily's laugh was hollow. "Not much to tell. Father was always working. Mother was always disappointed. In everything, especially me. She stared into her coffee. The company was everything. Still is, I suppose. That's why this breach hit so hard. It's not just about the company, though, is it? Emily looked up, startled by his perception. No, she admitted. It's about proving them wrong, proving I can handle this. She didn't add that she'd already proven them right with her impulsive ultimatum that first day. You know, Daniel said carefully, sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we need help. Is that what you did? After Sarah? Eventually, my church family practically moved in that first month. Brought meals, helped with Sophie, just showed up. He smiled at the memory. I fought it at first, wanted to prove I could handle everything alone. But you couldn't? None of us can. That's the beauty of community. They worked in companionable silence for a while. The only sounds, the clicking of keyboards and occasional sips of coffee. Around midnight, Emily noticed Daniel's typing had slowed. She glanced over to find him fighting to keep his eyes open. Maybe we should call it a night, she suggested. Just one more security patch, he mumbled, his head drooping. Emily smiled despite herself. She knew she should wake him, send him home. Instead, she found herself quietly opening the storage closet where she knew emergency supplies were kept. She pulled out a soft blanket, kept there for employees who sometimes worked overnight during critical projects. Daniel's breathing had deepened into the rhythm of sleep. His face looked younger, peaceful. Emily carefully draped the blanket over his shoulders, moving slowly to avoid waking him. A strand of his hair had fallen across his forehead, and she resisted the strange urge to brush it back. Instead, she gathered her things, turned off the harsh overhead lights, leaving only the soft glow of desk lamps. At the door, she paused, looking back at Daniel's sleeping form. Something warm and unfamiliar stirred in her chest, an emotion she wasn't ready to name. Shaking her head at her own softness, Emily slipped quietly from the office into the night. The evening had changed something between them, though neither would admit it yet. In the quiet hours of shared confidences, walls had begun to crumble. Emily's heart felt lighter than it had in years, even as it confused her. Daniel's steady presence and quiet strength affected her in ways she hadn't expected. She sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine, remembering the gentle way Daniel spoke about his daughter, the raw honesty in his voice when he talked about Sarah. For the first time, she understood why her ultimatum had struck him so deeply. It wasn't just pride or principle. It was about honoring the love he'd lost and protecting the precious relationship with his daughter. The city lights blurred as Emily drove home, her mind full of the evening's conversations. She thought about Daniel's words about community and asking for help. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face everything alone anymore. The autumn evening cast long shadows across Daniel's modest suburban home as Emily pulled into the driveway. Her sleek luxury car looked out of place next to Daniel's well-worn sedan. She sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, wondering if this was a mistake. The invitation had come from Sophie during one of her after-school visits to the IT department, so earnest and excited that even Emily's well-practiced refusals had crumbled. Taking a deep breath, Emily smoothed her designer skirt and grabbed the bottle of sparkling cider she'd brought, remembering at the last minute that wine wouldn't be appropriate. The front walkway was decorated with chalk drawings, and a basketball hoop hung over the garage. It was all so normal. Before she could ring the doorbell, Sophie flung the door open. "Miss Emily, you came!" The little girl wore a bright yellow apron covered in flour, her dark curls escaping from their ponytail. Daniel appeared behind his daughter, also wearing an apron, though his was a more subdued blue. "Sophie, let her at least come inside first," he said with a gentle laugh. "Welcome to our home, Emily." Emily stepped into the warm kitchen, where the smell of baking chicken filled the air. Schoolbooks and art supplies were scattered across one end of the kitchen table, while the other end was set for dinner with mismatched plates and everyday silverware. It was so different from her stark modern apartment with its untouched designer kitchen. "We're making rolls," Sophie announced proudly, pointing to lumpy balls of dough on a baking sheet. "I helped knead them myself. They look very unique," Emily said diplomatically, making Sophie giggle. Daniel gestured to the kitchen island. "Please, make yourself comfortable. We're almost done here." He moved efficiently around the kitchen, checking the chicken, stirring something on the stove. "Sophie, remember what we talked about with setting the table?" "Oh!" Sophie scrambled to rearrange the forks she'd placed on the wrong side of the plates. Emily watched their easy interaction, the way they moved around each other in a familiar dance of family routine. "Can I help with anything?" Emily offered, feeling awkward just standing there in her work clothes. "You're our guest," Daniel insisted, But if you'd like to help Sophie finish setting the table, I'm sure she'd love that. Sophie grabbed Emily's hand with flour-covered fingers, pulling her toward the drawer of napkins. We use the fancy ones when we have company, she explained seriously, selecting paper napkins with bright flowers printed on them. As they worked together, Emily noticed crayon drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets, a family calendar filled with Sophie's activities, and a photo of a smiling woman who must have been Sarah, Daniel's late wife. This home held so many memories, so much life. Dinner was simple but delicious. Baked chicken, roasted vegetables, and Sophie's proudly misshapen rolls. Emily couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten a home-cooked meal that wasn't prepared by her personal chef. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily, mostly led by Sophie's cheerful chatter about school and her friends. "Miss Emily, do you want to see what I made in art class today?" Sophie asked as they finished eating. "It's for our family project." "Sophie?" Daniel started, looking slightly uncomfortable, but Sophie was already running to get her backpack. She returned with a large piece of construction paper, colored with markers and crayons. "We had to draw our family," Sophie announced proudly, spreading the paper on the cleared table. Emily's breath caught as she looked at the drawing. There was Daniel, drawn tall with a big smile and spiky brown hair. Sophie had drawn herself in the middle, holding hands with her father, and on the other side, drawn in a purple dress with long dark hair, was unmistakably Emily. "See?" Sophie pointed excitedly. "That's Daddy, and me, and you. Mrs. Alvarez said we could draw anyone we want in our family." Emily stared at the picture, her throat tight. She could feel Daniel's concerned gaze on her, but couldn't look up. In Sophie's childish artwork, they looked happy, connected, like they belonged together, like a real family. It's beautiful, Sophie," Emily managed to say, her voice hardly more than a whisper. "Thank you for including me." "Of course I included you. You're helping Daddy save everybody's jobs, and you came to church with us, and now you're having dinner with us." Sophie's logic was simple and devastating in its innocence. Daniel cleared his throat. "Sophie, why don't you go get ready for your bath? It's getting late." After Sophie bounced away, Emily stood quickly, gathering her things. "I should go. Thank you for dinner. It was lovely." "Emily?" Daniel started, but she shook her head. "Really, I need to go. I have early meetings tomorrow." She hurried to the door, barely hearing Daniel's goodbye. In her car, Emily's carefully maintained composure crumbled. Tears blurred her vision as she gripped the steering wheel. Sophie's drawing burned into her memory. All her life, she'd told herself she didn't need family, didn't want the mess and complications of emotional attachments. She'd built her walls high and strong, focusing on success and control. But sitting in that warm kitchen, watching Daniel and Sophie's easy affection, being included in Sophie's innocent vision of family, it had cracked something open inside her. For the first time, Emily felt the full weight of her loneliness, the ache of wanting something she'd never let herself have. She wiped her eyes roughly, trying to pull herself together, but Sophie's drawing kept floating in her mind. 3 figures, holding hands, connected, belonging, everything Emily had never had, everything she suddenly, desperately wanted. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Carvertech's main conference room, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. Emily stood at the front, her usual confidence wavering as she watched board members and investors file in. Their expensive suits and stern expressions made the room feel colder than usual. Claire, Emily's assistant, hurried around placing leather portfolios at each seat, her worried glances not going unnoticed. Near the door, Daniel's IT team huddled together, their casual business attire standing out among the sea of designer suits. They whispered encouragement to Daniel, who stood quietly reviewing his presentation notes one last time. Marcus Wheeler, the lead investor, settled into his chair at the head of the table, his steel gray hair and sharp eyes commanding attention. "Let's get started," he announced, checking his Rolex. "We all know why we're here. Carvertech's numbers are concerning." Emily stepped forward, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "Thank you all for coming. Before we discuss the financial proposals, I'd like to introduce Daniel Brooks, our IT department head. He has prepared a comprehensive analysis of our current situation." Wheeler's eyebrows rose slightly. "With all due respect, Miss Carver, we're here to discuss bottom lines, not technical details." "The technical details are our bottom line," Emily replied, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. She nodded to Daniel, who moved to the front of the room. The board members shifted impatiently as Daniel connected his laptop to the projector. Several checked their phones or whispered to each other. Emily felt her stomach tighten, remembering all the times she'd been one of those dismissive executives. But Daniel stood tall, his quiet confidence filling the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady, "I know you're here to discuss outsourcing our IT operations. The numbers look good on paper, but I'm here to show you something more valuable than immediate cost savings." He clicked to his first slide, showing a map of their local community with glowing points of light. Each light represents a family supported by Carver Tech jobs, not just in IT, but in all the local businesses our employees support. Wheeler leaned forward, frowning. "Mr. Brooks, we're well aware of the human element, but business decisions can't be based on sentiment." "This isn't about sentiment," Daniel replied, clicking to the next slide. "It's about sustainable growth." He launched into a detailed presentation of his team's innovations, their response times, their deep understanding of the company's systems. His passion was evident in every word, every gesture. Emily watched the room slowly transform. Board members who had been checking their phones now looked up, engaged. Even Wheeler's frown had softened to thoughtful consideration. "Our team didn't just patch the recent security breach," Daniel continued. "We developed new protocols that are now being considered for industry-wide adoption. That kind of innovation doesn't come from outsourced teams working from a manual halfway around the world." He showed charts comparing response times between local and outsourced IT departments. "Every minute of downtime costs us money. Our local team's average response time is under 15 minutes. The industry standard for outsourced teams? 2 hours." Wheeler interrupted. "But the cost savings would be obliterated by a single major system failure," Emily found herself saying. The words came naturally, surprising her. "Daniel's team has prevented 3 such failures in the past month alone." The room fell silent. Emily walked to stand beside Daniel, their shoulders nearly touching. "I've seen firsthand what this team can do. They're not just employees, they're innovators, problem solvers, and part of our community." Daniel pulled up his final slides, showing the team's proposals for future innovations. "We're not asking you to choose between profit and people," he said. "We're showing you how investing in our local team will generate more value than outsourcing ever could." The presentation ended, and Emily felt the energy in the room shift. Board members were nodding, taking notes. Wheeler sat back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "Impressive," Wheeler finally said. "Very impressive. Miss Carver, you've been unusually quiet about cost-cutting today. This isn't the Emily Carver I remember from previous meetings." Emily straightened her spine. "Because I've learned something important, Mr. Wheeler. Sometimes the best business decisions aren't about cutting, they're about growing. Daniel's team has shown me that." The meeting concluded with Wheeler requesting detailed proposals for implementing Daniel's innovations. As other board members gathered their things, several stopped to shake Daniel's hand or discuss his ideas further. Emily gathered her papers, her hands trembling slightly from the aftermath of adrenaline. She hadn't expected to feel so strongly, to defend Daniel so instinctively. As they headed for the door, their hands brushed accidentally while reaching for the same folder. They both froze. The simple touch sent an electric current through Emily's arm. She looked up to find Daniel's eyes on hers, filled with something she couldn't quite name. The charged silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Around them, board members continued filing out, but Emily and Daniel remained still, caught in that moment of connection, neither willing to break it first. The office building stood quiet in the midnight hour, most of its windows dark except for 2 pools of light on the executive floor. Inside Emily's spacious corner office, the desk lamp cast a warm glow over scattered papers and empty coffee cups. Daniel sat across from Emily, his tie loosened, as they reviewed the final system reports together. Emily's IT team had worked tirelessly over the past weeks. They'd not only patched the security breach, but had implemented innovative solutions that strengthened the entire network. The company's stock had stabilized, and client confidence was returning. Emily couldn't deny the impressive turnaround. "These numbers are remarkable," Emily said softly, setting down the last report. Her usual sharp tone was absent, replaced by genuine appreciation. "Your team exceeded every benchmark we set." Daniel smiled tiredly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "They're good people. They just needed someone to believe in them." Emily's fingers traced the edge of her desk. "Like Sophie said, about believing in people." She met his eyes. "I was wrong about your department, Daniel. About a lot of things." The quiet admission hung in the air between them. Through their late nights working together, Emily had seen firsthand how Daniel led his team, with patience, respect, and unwavering support. It was so different from her own harsh management style. "Thank you," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't just save the company. You showed me a better way to lead." Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the powerful CEO to the vulnerable woman beneath. The office lights softened her features, and exhaustion had stripped away her usual defensive armor. She seemed younger somehow, more real. "You know," he said carefully, "sometimes the strongest leadership comes from admitting when we're wrong. You did that. That takes courage." Emily stood, needing to move. She walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights twinkling below. Daniel joined her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I've spent so many years being tough," she admitted. "I thought that's what it took to succeed, to be respected." She turned to face him. "But your team respects you because you're kind, not because you're cruel." "They respect me because I see them as people, not just employees," Daniel replied. "Something you've started doing too, Emily. I've noticed the change in you." The air between them felt charged with unspoken emotions. Weeks of working closely together, sharing meals, watching Sophie's innocent attempts at matchmaking, it had all led to this moment. Emily took a small step closer. "When I made that terrible ultimatum that first day," she shook her head, embarrassed. "I was desperate and afraid. But now," Daniel's voice was gentle, "now I find myself wanting to kiss you for entirely different reasons." The confession hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Daniel's eyes softened as he looked at her, remembering all the small moments that had brought them here. Her kindness to Sophie, her growing compassion for his team, her willingness to change. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, Daniel reached for her hand. Emily's fingers trembled slightly as they intertwined with his. He drew her closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek with infinite tenderness. When their lips met, it wasn't born from ultimatums or desperation. It was gentle, sweet, with newfound trust and genuine affection. Emily's hands gripped Daniel's shoulders as she melted into the kiss, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. When they finally parted, both were breathing unsteadily. Emily's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and Daniel brushed his thumb gently across her cheek. "We should probably head home," he murmured. "It's late." Emily nodded, still holding his hand. "Yes, we should." She gathered her things with her free hand, reluctant to let go. They walked to the parking garage together, sharing small smiles and stolen glances. At their cars, they paused, both glowing with cautious joy. "Good night, Daniel," Emily said softly. "Good night, Emily." They drove home separately through the quiet streets, each filled with hope for what tomorrow might bring. The kiss had changed everything, transforming their careful alliance into something deeper, something real. For the first time, both dared to believe that perhaps a new chapter was beginning. One written not in corporate memos, but in the language of second chances and healing hearts. The morning started like any other at CarverTech. Employees shuffled through security, coffee cups in hand, chatting about weekend plans. But everything changed when phones started buzzing with incoming emails. Daniel was helping Sophie pack her backpack for school when his phone lit up. "Just a second, sweetheart," he said, reaching for the device. The subject line made his stomach drop. "Leaked. CEO's manipulation exposed." The attached memo detailed Emily's ultimatum from that stormy Monday morning. Every word felt like a punch to his gut. The message had been forwarded countless times, spreading through the company like wildfire. "Daddy?" Sophie tugged at his sleeve. "Are you okay? Your face looks funny." Daniel forced a smile. "I'm fine, sweetie. Let's get you to school." At the office, whispers followed him down every corridor. His team exchanged worried glances as he passed. The IT department, usually buzzing with activity, fell silent when he entered. Everyone had seen the memo. Claire, Emily's assistant, caught him in the hallway. Her face was pale with concern. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she'd done that." He nodded stiffly. "Neither did I." The past weeks of working together, the gentle moments, the growing trust, it all felt hollow now. Had Emily been playing him all along? Was everything, including her kindness to Sophie, just manipulation? In the break room, he overheard two accounting managers whispering, "Can you believe it? Using someone's job as blackmail for a kiss? That's harassment." Poor Daniel. He has a little girl to support. She knew exactly what she was doing. Daniel's coffee turned bitter in his mouth. He defended Emily to his team, to the board, to everyone. He'd started to believe in her change of heart. Now he felt like a fool. Mid-morning, Emily tried to catch him in the hallway. "Daniel, please, we need to talk about this." He stepped back, maintaining professional distance. "I think everything's been said in that memo, Miss Carver." Her face crumpled at his formal tone. "It's not what you think. That moment. I was desperate, yes, but everything since then has been real." "Real?" Daniel's voice was quiet but sharp. Was it real when you used my daughter's feelings to manipulate me? When you let her believe you could be part of our family? No. Sophie means everything to me now. You both do. Now? After you threatened to destroy the livelihoods of 20 families unless I kissed you? The words tasted like ash in his mouth. I trusted you. I defended you. I let you into our lives. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Daniel, he held up a hand. I need to protect my daughter. She's lost enough already. Throughout the day, the office buzzed with speculation. Emily's reputation, already stern, now seemed cruel and calculating. Board members distanced themselves. Even Mrs. Alvarez, Sophie's teacher, gave Daniel a sympathetic look when he picked up Sophie that afternoon. That evening, Daniel sat Sophie down in their living room. Her favorite stuffed penguin clutched tight in her arms. She looked up at him with worried eyes. She was too perceptive sometimes, just like her mother had been. Sweetheart, he began gently, remember how Miss Carver has been spending time with us lately? Sophie nodded eagerly. She likes your spaghetti, Daddy, and she helped me with my art project. Daniel's heart ached. Well, sometimes grown-ups. Sometimes things don't work out the way we hope. Miss Carver may not be spending time with us anymore. But why? Sophie's lower lip trembled. Doesn't she like us anymore? Oh, honey. He pulled her close. It's complicated. Sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt other people even when they don't mean to. Like when I broke Jenny's crayon and said I didn't. Something like that, but bigger. He stroked her hair. The important thing is that you and I have each other. We're gonna be okay. Across town, Emily sat alone in her darkened office. The city lights twinkled beyond her window, but she barely saw them through her tears. On her desk sat Sophie's art project, the one where she'd drawn them all together as a family. Emily touched it gently, remembering Sophie's proud smile. The memo had exposed her worst moment, but it couldn't show how that moment had changed her. It couldn't show the warmth of Sunday mornings at church, the late-night conversations with Daniel, or Sophie's small hand slipping into hers with complete trust. Now, it was all broken. The board was calling for an emergency meeting. Her employees looked at her with fear again instead of respect. Worst of all, she'd lost the chance at the family she'd finally allowed herself to want. Claire knocked softly before entering. Emily? The board wants to move tomorrow's meeting to 8 a.m. Emily nodded, quickly wiping her eyes. Thank you, Claire. Her assistant hesitated. For what it's worth, I've seen how you've changed. Maybe if you explain. How do I explain threatening someone's job for a kiss? Emily's laugh was bitter. The truth is, I was that person. Cold, manipulative, willing to use people's fears against them. She looked at Sophie's drawing again. I'm not that person anymore, but maybe it's too late. After Claire left, Emily remained at her desk, surrounded by the evidence of her success, awards, certificates, profit reports. None of it mattered now. She'd finally found something real, something worth more than all her achievements, and she'd lost it before it truly began. The security guard's footsteps echoed in the hallway, making his rounds. Emily stayed motionless in her chair, Sophie's drawing cradled in her hands, letting the tears fall freely in the darkness. The hallways of Carver Tech felt different now. Where there had once been warmth beginning to grow, only echoes remained. Emily watched from her office window as employees hurried past, avoiding eye contact. The whispers followed her everywhere. How the cold-hearted CEO had tried to blackmail Daniel Brooks into kissing her. Daniel's IT team worked efficiently but silently whenever she passed through. Their loyalty to their leader was clear in their stony faces. Gone were the friendly greetings and small talk that had started to make this place feel like home. Claire, her assistant, placed another stack of reports on her desk. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 9, she said quietly. Emily noticed how Claire's eyes didn't quite meet hers anymore. Thank you, Emily replied, her voice smaller than she intended. After Claire left, Emily found herself staring at Daniel's latest system report. His signature at the bottom was perfectly professional, no trace of the warmth that had been growing between them. 3 days had passed since the memo leaked. 3 days of watching Daniel walk past her office without a glance. The worst part was catching glimpses of Sophie in the hallway after school, holding her father's hand and looking confused about why they didn't stop to say hello anymore. That evening, Emily stayed late again, unable to face her empty apartment. The cleaning staff had already gone home, leaving the building eerily quiet. She walked the dark hallways, passing the IT department where she'd made that terrible threat weeks ago. Through the glass walls, she could see Daniel's empty desk. A child's drawing was pinned to his bulletin board, Sophie's artwork of the three of them together as a family. Emily's throat tightened. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, remembering how it felt to sit at their dinner table, to walk with them in the sunshine after church, to see hope in Daniel's eyes when he looked at her, all destroyed because of her moment of cruel desperation weeks ago. She made her way to the small break room, needing coffee to get through another lonely night of work. The room still smelled faintly of the cookies Sophie had shared last week, proudly announcing she'd helped her daddy bake them. Emily's hands shook as she tried to put the coffee filter in place. "I've lost them," she whispered to the empty room. "I've lost everything." The coffee maker gurgled to life, but Emily couldn't hold back the sob that had been building for days. She sank into one of the plastic chairs, buried her face in her hands, and finally let the tears fall. All her life, she'd built walls to protect herself from pain. But those walls had only trapped her in loneliness, pushing away anyone who tried to get close. "I don't know how to do this anymore," she whispered through her tears. Looking up at the ceiling, Emily did something she hadn't done since she was a little girl, something she'd seen Daniel do quietly at his desk when he thought no one was watching. She prayed. "God?" Her voice cracked. "I know I haven't talked to you in forever. I don't even know if I'm doing this right." She wiped her eyes with trembling fingers. "But I'm so tired of being afraid. Tired of hurting people before they can hurt me. I saw what real love looks like in Daniel's home, in that church, in Sophie's innocent heart, and I ruined it all." The coffee maker beeped, but Emily barely heard it. "I don't deserve their forgiveness, but please, please, give me the courage to face what I've done, to tell the truth, even if it means losing everything. I don't want to be this person anymore." She sat there for a long time, tears falling silently in the dim break room. The silence felt different now. Not empty, but full of something she couldn't quite name. Peace, maybe, or acceptance. Standing up, Emily walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below, reminding her of the night she and Daniel had worked late, sharing stories and laughter. She touched the cool glass, seeing her reflection, tear-stained but somehow lighter. She knew what she had to do. No more hiding behind power plays and corporate masks. No more running from her own heart. Tomorrow, she would face the board, the employees, and Daniel with complete honesty. She would own her mistakes, even if it cost her everything. Back in her office, Emily began typing. Her fingers moved steadily across the keyboard as she drafted a statement, laying out the full truth of what had happened that stormy Monday morning. She included her own faults, her fears, and how Daniel's integrity had started to change her heart. When she finished, she read it over one last time. For the first time in her career, maybe in her life, every word was completely honest. No spin, no corporate language to hide behind. Just the truth, as raw and real as the tears that had fallen in the break room. Emily printed the statement and placed it in her briefcase. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. But as she finally left the office that night, she felt something she hadn't expected. Freedom. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't face it, hiding behind walls of her own making. The security guard nodded to her as she passed through the lobby. "Good night, Miss Carver." "Good night, Joe," she replied, managing a small smile. Outside, the night air was cool on her tear-stained cheeks. She stood there for a moment, looking up at the stars, barely visible through the city lights. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was thanking God, or Daniel, or Sophie, or maybe all of them, for showing her there was another way to live. Tomorrow would be hard, but for the first time in her life, Emily Carver was ready to face the truth with an open heart. The grand conference room at Carver Tech buzzed with tension. Shareholders filled the leather chairs around the massive oval table, while others stood along the walls. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, but it did little to warm the chill in the air. Emily Carver stood at the entrance, her hand trembling slightly as she gripped her presentation folder. Claire, her assistant, touched her arm gently. "Everyone's here, Miss Carver." Through the glass doors, Emily could see the room was packed. Board members sat rigid in their seats, their faces stern. Junior executives clustered near the walls, smartphones ready to document whatever drama might unfold. In the far corner, Daniel's IT team huddled together, their faces a mix of worry and determination. They had worked so hard these past weeks, saving the company's systems, innovating solutions that went far beyond anyone's expectations. And there, at the very back of the room, stood Daniel Brooks himself. He kept his distance from everyone, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The sight of him made Emily's heart ache. Taking a deep breath, Emily straightened her spine and pushed open the doors. The room fell silent as she walked to the front, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She placed her folder on the podium, but didn't open it. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I know many of you are here expecting a financial report, system updates, and projections for the next quarter." She paused, looking around the room. "But before we get to any of that, there's something I need to address." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Emily caught fragments of words. Scandal, ultimatum, IT department. She saw one of the board members, Thompson, smirk slightly. He was the one who had leaked her shameful moment to everyone. 3 weeks ago, Emily continued, her voice growing stronger, "I made a terrible mistake. When our systems were breached, I stormed into the IT department and gave their head, Daniel Brooks, an ultimatum." Her hands gripped the podium edges. "I threatened to fire his entire department unless he kissed me." The whispers grew louder. Someone gasped. Emily forced herself to look up, to face the judgment in their eyes. It was reckless, cruel, and completely unprofessional. "I abused my position of power and tried to manipulate a good man who was only trying to protect his team and support his daughter." Emily's voice cracked slightly at the mention of Sophie, but she pressed on. "I've spent my career building walls, using fear and intimidation to maintain control. I thought that made me strong." She glanced at Daniel's team, who were watching her with surprised expressions. "But true strength isn't about fear or control. I've learned that from watching Daniel Brooks and his department these past weeks. They showed me what real leadership looks like." Emily stepped away from the podium, moving to stand in the center of the room. "While I was making threats, they were making miracles happen. Not only did they stop the breach, but they developed new security protocols that have already attracted interest from 3 major tech firms. They did this not because they were afraid of me, but because they believe in each other and this company." The room had grown completely still. Even Thompson had stopped smirking. "The financial reports you'll see today show a company that's stronger than ever. Our systems are secure, our innovations are drawing attention, and our local workforce is proving that we don't need to outsource to succeed." Emily's voice grew passionate. "But none of that came from my threats or pressure. It came from a team of dedicated people led by someone who understands that true leadership is about lifting others up, not pushing them down." She turned slightly, finally allowing herself to look directly at Daniel. His arms had uncrossed, and something in his expression had softened. "I can't undo what I did," Emily admitted, addressing both Daniel and the room. "But I can learn from it. I can change. This company deserves leadership based on respect, not fear. Innovation driven by support, not threats." She took another deep breath. "If the board wants my resignation, I'll understand. But before I go, I wanted everyone to know the truth, and to publicly thank the IT department, and especially Daniel Brooks, for saving not just our systems, but perhaps something more important, our company's soul." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily stood there, feeling stripped bare but somehow lighter. She watched as people exchanged glances, saw the mix of shock and something else, respect, perhaps, in their eyes. In the back of the room, Daniel uncrossed his arms completely. The hard line of his jaw had softened, and though he didn't smile, his eyes held a new understanding as they met hers across the room. The anger that had been there these past days had melted into something else, something that made Emily's heart skip a beat. Emily's voice trembled as she finished her speech, her hands gripping the podium. "I was wrong, not just about the ultimatum, but about so many things. Daniel Brooks and his team didn't just save our systems, they showed me what real leadership looks like, what integrity looks like." The silence in the room was deafening. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while shareholders exchanged uncertain glances. Claire, Emily's assistant, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Daniel's IT team sat together, their faces a mixture of surprise and respect. A small movement at the back of the room caught everyone's attention. The heavy oak doors creaked open, and Sophie Brooks peeked in, her bright yellow backpack nearly as big as she was. Mrs. Alvarez, who had brought her from school, gave her an encouraging nod from the doorway. Daniel stood frozen, watching his daughter slip into the room. Sophie's Mary Jane shoes clicked softly against the polished floor as she made her way through the forest of legs and chairs. Her dark curls bounced with each determined step, and her favorite rainbow dress swished around her knees. The room felt even quieter, if that was possible. Everyone watched as this small child walked straight up to Emily Carver, the CEO who moments ago had been baring her soul to a room full of judgmental faces. Emily's hands trembled as she stepped away from the podium. She knelt down, her expensive suit meeting the floor without hesitation. Her eyes were level with Sophie's now, and everyone could see the tears threatening to spill. Sophie reached out and took Emily's hand in her small one. Her voice, clear and sweet, carried through the silent room. "See, Daddy? She's not scary anymore." The simple truth of a child's observation broke something in the room. Someone let out a watery chuckle. Another person sniffed loudly. Then, like a wave building momentum, applause began to ripple through the conference room. Emily pulled Sophie into her arms, no longer trying to hold back her tears. They flowed freely down her cheeks as she held the little girl who had somehow seen past all her walls. Sophie's small arms wrapped around Emily's neck, patting her back the way Daniel did when Sophie herself had a bad day. "It's okay," Sophie whispered in Emily's ear, though several people nearby could hear. "Daddy says everybody makes mistakes. That's why pencils have erasers." The applause grew louder. Daniel's team members were on their feet, clapping with genuine enthusiasm. Claire was openly crying now, and even some of the most hardened board members were wiping their eyes or clearing their throats suspiciously. Emily's shoulders shook as she cried, years of loneliness and fear washing away in front of everyone. Sophie stayed in her arms, as natural and comfortable as if they'd known each other forever. The little girl's presence seemed to transform Emily from an intimidating CEO into simply a woman learning to love and be loved. Daniel watched the scene unfold, feeling the walls he'd built around his heart since the betrayal crumbling. He saw now what he'd missed before, that Emily's original ultimatum hadn't come from cruelty, but from desperation and fear. The woman holding his daughter wasn't the same person who had stormed into his department that stormy Monday morning. He moved forward through the crowd, which parted for him naturally. His footsteps were steady and sure as he approached Emily and Sophie. Without hesitation, he placed his hand on Emily's shoulder, offering quiet strength and forgiveness in that simple touch. Emily looked up at him, her mascara slightly smudged, her carefully maintained image completely undone, but her eyes held something he'd never seen before: hope, vulnerability, and a question she didn't dare ask out loud. Sophie beamed at both of them, still holding Emily's hand. "Group hug?" she suggested hopefully, making several people in the room chuckle warmly. The applause continued, filling the room with its steady rhythm. Board members were standing now, briefcases and presentations forgotten. Daniel's team huddled together, grinning and wiping away tears. Claire had moved closer, holding a box of tissues that was quickly making its rounds through the room. In that moment, surrounded by witnesses to this unexpected scene of redemption, something shifted. The shareholders weren't just seeing a company's leadership anymore, they were seeing human beings, real people capable of both mistakes and growth, fear and courage, pride and humility. Mrs. Alvarez watched from the doorway, her teacher's heart full at seeing how her young student had bridged the gap between two hurting adults. She saw what everyone else in the room saw, that sometimes the wisest words come from the smallest voices. And that true strength isn't about never making mistakes, it's about having the courage to own them and change. Emily's hand covered Daniel's where it rested on her shoulder, a touch that spoke of gratitude and possibility. Sophie stood between them, a living bridge between past and future, her innocent wisdom having accomplished what weeks of meetings and negotiations couldn't, showing that under all the corporate titles and adult complications, there was still room for simple truths and second chances. The shareholder meeting dispersed slowly, with people filing out in small groups, their whispered conversations echoing through the marble lobby. Emily stood by the tall windows, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Her shoulders felt lighter, as if the weight of years of pride had finally lifted. Daniel spoke quietly with his team near the conference room doors. Mrs. Martinez from accounting squeezed his arm as she passed, and Tom from security gave him a knowing nod. Sophie sat in a plush chair nearby, swinging her legs and humming while she drew in her notebook. Claire approached Emily with a stack of papers. "The shareholders' votes are all in favor, Miss Carver, and the press release about the new IT initiatives is ready." She hesitated, then added softly, "That was very brave of you today." "Thank you, Claire." Emily managed a small smile. Could you give me a moment with Daniel, privately?" Claire nodded, understanding in her eyes. She walked over to Sophie, offering to show her the fancy coffee machine in the break room. Sophie bounced up eagerly, taking Claire's hand. Daniel watched them go, then turned toward Emily. The late afternoon sun caught the silver at his temples, and his eyes held a warmth she hadn't seen since the betrayal. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets. "Your speech?" he began. It wasn't what anyone expected. Emily turned from the window to face him fully. "I'm done with expectations, Daniel. Done with being who everyone thinks I should be." Her voice was quiet but steady. "These past weeks, working with you, spending time with Sophie, it showed me everything I've been missing." She moved to one of the leather chairs and sat down, gesturing for him to join her. Daniel settled into the chair opposite, his presence solid and reassuring. When I made that horrible ultimatum, Emily continued, I was operating from fear. Fear of losing control, fear of failure. But watching you with your team, seeing how you lead with kindness instead of intimidation, she shook her head. You showed me there's a better way. We all have our moments of weakness, Daniel said gently. What matters is what we learn from them. Emily leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've learned that power means nothing without purpose. That success feels empty without someone to share it with. She took a deep breath. Your daughter asked me once if I was lonely in my big office. I denied it then, but she saw right through me, just like she always does. A small smile tugged at Daniel's lips. Sophie has a gift for seeing people's hearts. She does. Emily's eyes grew misty. When she took my hand today in front of everyone, it felt like coming home. Something I haven't felt since I was a little girl. Daniel's expression softened. Emily, please. She held up a hand. Let me finish. I know I hurt you with my actions. I know trust takes time to rebuild. But I don't want to be CEO Emily Carver anymore, ruling through fear and ultimatums. I want to be someone who deserves to be part of your lives. She stood up and moved closer to him, her heart pounding. I'm not asking for marriage or making demands. I'm asking for a chance to be part of your family, to learn what real love looks like, to be there for Sophie's art shows and your Sunday dinners, to build something true and honest with you both. Daniel rose slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Are you proposing? I suppose I am. Emily laughed softly, wiping at a tear. Not for marriage, not yet, but for belonging, for a chance to show you who I really am, who I want to become. The silence stretched between them, filled with possibility. Then Sophie's voice rang out from the doorway. Daddy, Miss Emily, the coffee machine makes hot chocolate too. They turned to see Sophie standing there with Claire, chocolate mustache adorning her upper lip. Daniel's eyes crinkled with love as he looked at his daughter, then back at Emily. You know, he said quietly, Sophie told me once that you just needed someone to believe in you. He stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. She was right. Yes, Emily whispered. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he opened his arms. Then yes. Yes to chances and belonging and building something new. Sophie ran over as Daniel pulled Emily into a warm embrace. The little girl wrapped her arms around them both, her face beaming. Group hug, she declared. And Emily felt Daniel's chest rumble with gentle laughter. Standing there, wrapped in the warmth of their embrace, Emily finally understood what real power felt like. It wasn't in corner offices or shareholder votes. It was in the trust shining in Daniel's eyes and the chocolate-smeared smile of a little girl who had seen past her walls to the truth of her heart. The late summer sun bathed Windsor Park in golden light as families gathered for the annual community picnic. Checkered blankets dotted the grass like a patchwork quilt, and the air buzzed with laughter and conversation. Emily sat cross-legged on her red and white blanket, watching Sophie chase bubbles with other children near the playground. You're getting better at this, Daniel said, handing Emily a paper plate loaded with potato salad and grilled chicken. His eyes crinkled with warmth as he settled beside her. Emily smoothed her casual sundress, still adjusting to being out of her usual business attire. Better at what? Relaxing. Daniel bumped her shoulder playfully. I haven't seen you check your phone once in the last hour. Heat crept into Emily's cheeks. I left it in the car on purpose. Claire can handle anything that comes up today. She paused, watching Sophie's pigtails bounce as she ran. I don't want to miss moments like this anymore. A group of children kicked a soccer ball nearby, their shouts of excitement carrying across the park. The aroma of barbecue drifted from the long row of grills where volunteers flipped burgers and hot dogs. Emily breathed it all in, savoring the simple pleasure of belonging. Miss Emily! Miss Emily! Sophie came running over, her face flushed with excitement. They're starting the three-legged race. Will you be my partner? Emily glanced uncertainly at Daniel, who gave her an encouraging nod. I've never done a three-legged race before, she admitted. Sophie's eyes widened. Never? Then you have to try? Please? Well, Emily looked down at her sundress, then back at Sophie's hopeful face. How can I say no to that smile? Minutes later, Emily found herself standing at the starting line with Sophie, their adjacent legs tied together with a soft rope. Around them, other parent-child pairs got into position, including Mrs. Alvarez with her young son. Don't worry, Sophie whispered, squeezing Emily's hand. Just follow my count. Inside feet first, then outside feet, like dancing. The race started with cheerful chaos. Emily and Sophie stumbled their first few steps, but soon found their rhythm. Inside, outside, inside, outside, Sophie chanted, giggling as they wobbled along. They didn't win, but they crossed the finish line together, falling into a laughing heap on the grass. Daniel jogged over to help untie them. That was quite a performance, you two. Did you see us, Daddy? Miss Emily is a natural, Sophie beamed, throwing her arms around Emily's waist. Emily hugged her back, her heart so full it ached. She caught Daniel watching them, his expression soft with something that looked like love. The afternoon flowed easily into evening. They played ring toss and face painted at the activity stations. Sophie convinced them both to try the balloon artist's creations, and soon Emily wore a delicate flower crown made of twisted balloons, matching Sophie's butterfly wings. As the sun began to dip, Daniel guided Emily toward a cluster of familiar faces from church. She recognized Sarah from the choir, and Tom, who always brought homemade cookies to coffee hour. Emily, so glad you could make it. Sarah welcomed her with a warm hug. Sophie was telling us all about your three-legged race adventure. I still can't believe I did that, Emily laughed, touching her balloon crown self-consciously. You're fitting right in, Tom said, offering her a cookie from his ever-present container. We've been hoping Daniel would bring you to more church events. Emily accepted the cookie, touched by their genuine warmth. These were people who knew about her past mistakes, about the ultimatum, about everything, and yet they welcomed her without judgment. They asked about her week, shared stories about their own families, and treated her like she'd always been part of their circle. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and easy silence. Emily found herself sharing stories about her own childhood, things she'd never told anyone except Daniel. Instead of the usual pity or awkwardness, she received understanding nods and gentle encouragement. As twilight painted the sky in soft purples and blues, lanterns began twinkling to life throughout the park. Sophie had dozed off on their blanket, her face peaceful under the gentle evening light. Emily tucked her light jacket around the sleeping child, her heart swelling with tender affection. Families began packing up around them, calling quiet goodnights. The sound of crickets rose in the growing dusk, mixing with distant laughter and the rustle of trees. Emily sat beside Sophie, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Daniel settled next to her, his presence warm and steady. He reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers. The simple gesture felt more intimate than any kiss they'd shared. This is what home feels like, he whispered, his voice carrying all the meaning in the world. Emily squeezed his hand, tears pricking at her eyes, because he was right. This was home. Not the empty mansion she'd grown up in, or her pristine penthouse apartment. Home was here, on a blanket in the park, with Sophie's gentle breathing and Daniel's hand in hers. Home was belonging. Home was love. They sat together in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the soft glow of lanterns and the whispered promise of tomorrow. Snow fell softly outside the stained glass windows of Grace Community Church, transforming the world into a gentle wonderland. Inside, warmth and candlelight created a cozy glow as families gathered for the Christmas Eve service. Emily Carver stood between Daniel Brooks and little Sophie, their breath mingling in the cool air as they sang carols together. Emily's heart swelled as she looked down at Sophie, who clutched both their hands while swaying to Silent Night. The child's face glowed with joy, her dark curls crowned with a red velvet bow that matched her Christmas dress. 6 months ago, Emily couldn't have imagined being here, surrounded by such pure love and acceptance. The transformation at Carver Tech had been remarkable. After that pivotal shareholders meeting, Emily had made bold changes. She'd promoted Daniel to Chief Innovation Officer, giving his team the resources they'd always deserved. The company culture shifted from fear to collaboration, and profits soared as employee satisfaction reached all-time highs. But the real changes were deeper, more personal. Emily felt it in the way her shoulders relaxed now, how genuine smiles came easily. The sharp edges of her personality had softened, worn smooth by Sophie's unconditional love and Daniel's patient understanding. Mrs. Alvarez, Sophie's teacher, caught Emily's eye from across the aisle and gave her a warm nod. Even the school pickup routine had become a source of joy rather than awkward encounters. Emily often joined Daniel now, helping Sophie with her backpack and art projects, learning the gentle rhythm of family life. Claire, Emily's assistant, sat a few rows back with her own family. Their working relationship had evolved into true friendship, built on mutual respect rather than intimidation. Emily had learned to listen, to value people over profits, to lead with her heart as much as her head. Daniel's IT team members were scattered throughout the congregation with their families. Ted and his wife had just had a baby, and Emily had personally ensured their parental leave policy exceeded industry standards. Sarah's daughter was in Sophie's Sunday school class now. These weren't just employees anymore. They were community. They were family. The pastor's message touched on themes of redemption and new beginnings. Emily felt tears prick her eyes as she remembered her first desperate prayer months ago, when everything seemed lost. Now here she was, standing in the very place where her heart had first begun to thaw that Sunday morning with Daniel and Sophie. Sophie tugged at Emily's sleeve, pointing to the nativity scene near the altar. "Look, Emily, the baby Jesus has a family too," she whispered loudly, making several nearby people smile. Emily squeezed her hand, amazed at how this child's simple wisdom had helped heal her own wounded heart. The congregation stood for another hymn, "O Holy Night." As the familiar melody filled the sanctuary, Emily felt Daniel's hand slip into hers. His touch was warm, steady, just like his love had been through all their ups and downs. He taught her that true strength came from vulnerability, not control. In the candlelit quiet between verses, Daniel turned to face her. His eyes held that same gentle determination she'd seen the day he'd refused her ultimatum. But now, there was something else there too. Something that made her heart skip. He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. Emily's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a delicate ring with a single diamond that caught the candlelight. Without words, without fanfare, he slipped it onto her finger as the choir sang about a night divine. Sophie, who had clearly been in on the secret, could contain herself no longer. She clapped her hands together in delight, bouncing on her toes. "Now we're really going to be a family!" she exclaimed in an excited whisper that carried through their section of pews. Scattered chuckles and murmurs of congratulations rippled through the nearby rows. Emily felt her cheeks flush, but not from embarrassment, from pure joy. The ring fit perfectly, just like she now fit perfectly into their lives. Daniel squeezed her hand, and Emily saw tears in his eyes matching her own. They'd come so far from that stormy Monday morning in her office. Pride had been replaced by humility, fear by faith, loneliness by love. As the final carol began, Emily closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. The words came easily now, flowing from a heart that had learned to trust again. "Thank you for second chances," she prayed silently. "Thank you for stubborn IT department heads who stand their ground. Thank you for little girls who see straight to the truth. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." The organ played softly as Silent Night filled the sanctuary once more. Emily stood between her future husband and their daughter. She could think of Sophie that way now, and felt complete peace settle over her. This was what home felt like. This was what family meant. This was the greatest Christmas gift she could have ever received. A heart healed by love, a life transformed by faith, and a future bright with promise. Sophie leaned against her side, humming along with the carol. Daniel's arm wrapped around them both, holding them close as the candlelight danced and the snow continued to fall outside. Emily's whispered prayer of gratitude mingled with the music, her heart finally, truly at peace. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Daniel Brooks, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.